going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 31 Days of Horror. I am your host, Mood616, and thank you once again for stopping in, guys. Yes, day 18 is here on the 31 Days of Horror Vol.5. And yes, we're going to take it back to the 50s, specifically 1959, with a film produced by Hammer Studios, and it is called The Man Who Could Cheat Death. Now, this movie right here is starring Anton Diffring, Hazel Court, and of course the master himself, Christopher Lee. This is actually a remake of a movie called The Man in Half Moon Street from 1945, which I've never seen before. They share the very similar premise and stuff. I believe that movie's more of like a noir kind of drama type deal. So yeah, I've never actually seen that one. This movie was made, kind of towards the start of Hammer making their horror films. I know they started making horror films and science fiction horror films like around the mid 50s and stuff. Hammer Studios has been around since the early 30s, but they mostly did like a lot of, noir and just mysteries and thrillers and stuff like that. But they got in the horror genre. This is one of the very first ones. Not very first ones, but I mean, in 4 years they've produced a lot of horror film stuff, but directed by Terence Fisher, who of course is known for directing so many classic horror films, such as the original, or the Mummy film. He did a bunch of Dracula films. He did a bunch of Frankenstein films, the Gorgon, the Two Faces, Dr. Jekyll. He did so many films. There's just way too many to name, and probably a lot of those films that even if you didn't know that Terence Fisher directed, he probably did. If you're a fan of horror films, Terence Fisher, or if you're a fan of Hammer horror films, Terence Fisher probably directed a bunch of your favorite films because he's very prolific in there. But getting into the premise of this one, basically this one follows the main character, George Bonnet. He is a doctor. He's living in Paris. It takes place in about 1890 France. And the thing is with George Bonnet is that he's about 105 years old. He has found a way to kind of, he's found eternal youth. He's found a way to restore youth and stuff like that, or keep his youth. And the way he does it is he replaces this certain gland in his body, and it keeps his youth. But the problem is with that, every 10 years he has to replace that gland because it just kind of wears out and stuff like that. And so every 10 years he either has to get a new gland from a cadaver or he has to kill somebody. In this case, it's about 1890 now, and he doesn't really have any access to these cadavers anymore, so he starts, killing off people and things like that. The other thing is, as it's approaching his 10-year renewal of his gland and stuff, his body starts to really break down. He has to drink this green elixir for the last 4 to 6 weeks or something like that, every 6 hours to maintain his youth, or he will just die. And what happens to him is basically, they try to explain it in the film, is that he, through the non-aging process of his eternal youth, as his body breaks down, he basically rapidly ages, and all the diseases that he would have had in those times and stuff kind of catch up to him at this, all at one moment. He's got to drink this elixir to sort out everything. It's actually a really interesting premise. So he's at this point now where he needs to, replace his gland in his body. And so he's called up his doctor that's been working with him for years and years, been doing all these surgeries on him and stuff. And his doctor's super late getting there. He doesn't know that his doctor, that he's had a stroke. And so when he finally shows up at his crib, at his house or whatever, he's all decrepit and stuff. His arm is all, not working and things like that. So now they have to find an alternate way to save his life. So that's where Christopher Lee's character comes in. He's a doctor, and they persuade him to, kind of do this surgery, which is very unethical by doctor's terms and things like that. So that's where I'll just leave the synopsis of the film. So my thoughts on this movie? Man, this movie has such an amazing premise. It starts out with a pretty awesome, very kind of like Jack the Ripper style killing in the beginning. It's very atmospheric, very Hammerish. And then we get introduced to all of our characters in this film, and it just gets so talky. Around the 30-minute mark, you think something's going to happen. Minor things happen. We get to see him kind of change, and the effects and stuff on him while he's going through this process is actually pretty cool and stuff. And you get to see these minor kills and things like that. But this movie is super, super talky. And I generally don't mind movies that are slow with a lot of dialogue and stuff. But in this case, the premise is so good, I just wanted to see more development of that premise and actually see things from that perspective of the narrative, not just these characters talking. We have so many conversations between, Dr. Bonnet and Christopher Lee and, the guy that plays the German doctor, I think, or maybe he's Italian doctor. doesn't matter. But anyways, there's so many conversations happening in this film, and then once it gets kind of discovered that these people are going missing, in comes a detective, and now he's investigating, and it gets even more talky, and then you get about maybe 10 minutes in the end of the film where it gets a little bit crazy and stuff, which is really good. The ending in the film is actually really good, but the beginning and the end are awesome. The whole middle part of this movie that runs about 83 minutes long is really, really long-winded, and all you're wanting to is just explore that narrative, and that whole side of the mad doctor-ish type things, because I'm a huge fan of mad scientist, mad doctor type films, and that's why I really wanted to check this one out, and also because it was directed by Terrence Fisher, and he's done so many of my favorite Hammer films, and but yeah, just all together, it really didn't execute itself properly. I mean, it's still not a bad film. I will say the acting's fantastic in this movie. The set pieces are phenomenal for the time because it's set in 1890. It looks really, really good. It's shot in color for 1959, which is another odd thing. But I really did enjoy that. It's shot in color, and the acting's great, of course. And, the ideas there, some of the effects are really cool and stuff, but the execution is just a little bit, I wouldn't even say sloppy. It doesn't seem motivated enough to get into a lot of horror stuff. I think if you remade this movie with this exact same premise, you could do something really, really strong with it. But like I said, the idea's there. It's just not executed to its full potential, in my opinion. It's very disappointing, actually, because, again, being a mad scientist film with the awesome Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee's such a presence again in this film. He's a little bit younger in this one, coming off Dracula and stuff. But yeah... it's a good film. Would I highly recommend this one? No, I won't highly recommend this film, but I can't give it a bad grade because it's actually a pretty well-made film on all accounts, except for the execution is just a little bit slow. But I usually would never say anything bad about a lot of heavy dialogue and stuff, but in this one it's just like, hey, guys, we get the point. Like, we understand what's going on here. Just let's get to some killing or something like that. So, The Man Who Could Cheat Death, I'm going to come in about a 6 out of 10. Like I said, not a bad movie. It's just execution is a little bit not exactly what I was looking for. But yeah, it's honestly one of the first Terrence Fisher films that I really wouldn't recommend of his because, like I said, he's done so many great Hammer films. Yeah, not a whole lot more to say about it because just there's a lot of dialogue. Like, a lot of dialogue. These actors memorized a shitload of dialogue. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it here for day 18. I'll be back tomorrow on day 19. Man, we are getting down to the nitty-gritty, man. I can't believe how fast this month goes. It's crazy to me. But yeah, I'll check you guys then. And as usual,